The Mandalorian Armor Chapter 7 now. During the events of Star Wars Return of the Jedi, I want to see him. The female had a gaze as sharp and cold as a bladed weapon, and to talk to him. Dengar could barely recognize her. He remembered her from Jabba's palace. She had been one of the obese Hutt's troop of dancing girls. Jabba had liked pretty things, regarding them as exquisite delicacies for his senses, like the wriggling food he'd stuffed down his capacious gullet. And just as with those squirming tidbits, Jabba had savored the death of the young and beautiful. The pet rancor, in its bone-lined cavern beneath the palace, had merely been an extension of Jabba's appetites. Dengar had witnessed one of the other dancing girls, a frightened little Twi'lek named Ula, being ripped apart by the claws of the beast. That had been before Luke Skywalker had killed the rancor, followed sometime later by its owner's death. No great loss, thought Dengar, with either one of them. Why? Leaning against the rocky wall of his hiding place's main chamber, he kept a safe distance from the female. He's not exactly a brilliant conversationalist at the moment. Her name was Neela. She had told him that much when he had caught her sneaking down the sloping tunnel from the surface. He had gotten the drop on her, catching her off guard from behind a stack of empty supply crates, with her throat in the crook of his arm, as Dengar's other hand had painfully bent her wrist up toward her shoulder blades. She'd answered a few questions for him, and then she had caught him in the shin with a hard, fast back kick, followed by a knee to the groin that had sent a small constellation of stars to the top of his skull. That's personal. They were in a standoff now, glaring at each other from across the cramped space. I have my own business with him. What business would an ex-dancing girl have with a bounty hunter, especially one as close to death as Boba Fett was right now? Maybe, mused Dengar, she thinks she can get a discount from him since he's so messed up. Though who would she want him to track down? He glanced over to the doorway of the hiding place's other chamber. What condition is our guest in today? The taller medical droid tilted its head unit to study the display of vital signs mounted on its own cylindrical body. The patient's condition is stable, announced SH Sigma 1B. The prognosis is unchanged, 012. From its previous trauma scan indices of 0.0, which means he's dying. That was another question. Why couldn't these gnarling droids just say what they meant? He'd had to bang this one around until the solenoids had rattled inside its carapace just to get it to speak this much of a plain basic. Wounds, added SH Sigma 1B's shorter companion. Severity. 1E-AXC gave a slow back-and-forth rotation of its top dome. Not goodness. Whatever. Dengar was looking forward to being rid of this irritating pair. That would come with either Boba Fett's death or his recovery, which was looking increasingly less likely. If that's the case, said Neela, then you're wasting my time. I need to talk to him right now. Well, that's sweet of you. Arms folded across his chest, Dengar nodded as he regarded her. You're not really concerned with whether some bounty hunter pitches it or not. You just want to pump him for some kind of information, right? She made no reply, but Dengar could tell that his words had struck home. The look the female gave him was even more murderous than before. A lot had changed since she'd been one of Jabba's fetching playthings. Even in this little time, the harsh winds of Tatooine's dune sea had scoured her flesh leaner and tauter, the heat of the double suns darkening her skin. What had been soft, nubile flesh, revealed by gossamer silks, was now concealed by the coarse, blood-stained trousers and sleeveless jacket that she must have scavenged from the corpse of one of Jabba's bodyguards. A thick leather belt, its attached holster empty, cinched the uniform tight to her waist and hunger-carved belly. Starving, thought Dengar. She had to be. The dune sea didn't exactly abound with protein sources here. Keeping an eye on her, Dengar reached into one of the crates and dug out a bar of compressed military rations, salvage from an Imperial scout ship that had crash-landed years before. He tossed the bar to the female. You look like you need it. Appetite widened her eyes, showing their deep violet color. Her fingers quickly tore open the thin metallic wrappings. She raised the slab, already softening as it absorbed what moisture it could from the air, to her mouth, but stopped herself before taking a bite. "Go ahead," said Dengar. "I'm not in the habit of poisoning people." He reached behind himself to one of the niches concealed in the chamber's stones. "If I wanted to get rid of you," his fist came out with a blaster in it. He raised the weapon and pointed it at Neela's forehead. "I could do it easier than that." Her gaze fastened on the blaster, as though its muzzle were doing the talking. "Good," said Dengar. His groin still ached from the blow he'd received. "Now I think we understand each other." A few seconds passed, then the female nodded slowly. She took a bite of the rations bar, chewed and swallowed. "I must inform you," came SH Sigma 1B's voice from the subchamber doorway, "that any further casualties will have a deleterious impact on our ability to perform our functions in a manner consistent with an appropriate level of therapeutic practice." Dengar swiveled the blaster toward the droid. "If there's any more casualties around here, I'll be sweeping them up with a magnet. Got me?" SH Sigma 1B leaned back, bumping against his companion. "Understanding," said Waniki, speaking for both of them. "Completeness." "That's nice. Go take care of your patient," said Dengar, slipping the blaster inside his own belt. He glanced back over at Neela. "You enjoying that?" She had virtually inhaled the rations bar. Her pale fingernails plucked out a few last crumbs from the wrappings. "Give me some answers," said Dengar, "and you can have another one." She crumpled the foil into a shining ball inside her small fist. "I'm getting soft," thought Dengar. There had been a time when he wouldn't have bothered asking questions. He wouldn't have lowered the blaster either, until there had been a corpse lying in front of him, with a hole burned through its brain. That was what letting himself fall in love. Not with this female, but with his betrothed, Manaru had done for him. That was always a fatal mistake for a bounty hunter. Somebody like Boba Fett survived at this game for as long as he had by stripping those useless emotions out of his heart. To look at Fett, even when he was unconscious on the pallet in the other chamber, was to look at a weapon, an assault rifle fully primed and charged for maximum destruction. Peel away that Mandalorian battle armor of his, and something equally hard and deadly was found beneath. And that, Dengar knew, was the difference, one of them at least, between himself and the galaxy's most feared bounty hunter. There was still something human inside Dengar, despite his having worked the bounty hunter trade, with all its spirit-eroding capabilities. That was the part that had looked upon Manaru, and had decided, despite all the rest of his scrabbling, callous nature, to twine his fate with hers. Manaru had asked him to marry her, and he had said yes. That human part had wanted to stay human, like a dwindling flame that struggles to keep from being snuffed out. He didn't want to wind up like Boba Fett, a killing machine with a blind, unfathomable mask for a face. It was that human part that had also decided to send Manaru away, once she had helped him get Boba Fett into this hiding place. Their separation from each other would continue at least until this business with Boba Fett was over. Dengar knew the risks in getting involved with someone who had as many grudge-bearing enemies as Fett. There were plenty of diehards from the old Bounty Hunters Guild who had good reason to hate his guts. If they found out that Boba Fett was still alive, they'd be swooping down on Tatooine en masse to finish him off. And me, Dengar had told himself. That hot-tempered Trandoshan Bosk would naturally assume that anyone befriending his longtime rival Boba Fett was an enemy to be killed with quick dispatch. This little hiding place would get filled up with corpses pretty quickly. Risks meant profits, though, in the bounty hunter trade. And profits were what Dengar needed if he was going to have any chance of paying off the massive debt load he was carrying and then have any kind of life with Manaru. He wanted out of this game, and the only way to accomplish that was to keep on playing it, for at least a few more rounds. And the best way to do that, he decided, was with a partner like Boba Fett. And that's what he offered me when Dengar had discovered him, half digested by the gullet of the Sarlacc, lying in the sun's baked wasteland. Fett had had enough remaining strength to speak, but not to protect himself. Dengar could have put him out of his misery right then and there, but had stayed his hand when Fett had spoken of a partnership between the two of them. The only card he'd had left to play, and a good one. We could clean up, Dengar had decided, him and me. A real good team. It all depended on just one thing, whether Fett had been lying to him. He could have been just playing for time enough for his wounds to heal, and for him to get his act back together. Dengar had been mulling it over ever since he had carried Fett down here. There was no history of Boba Fett ever working with a partner before. He had always been a lone operator. Why should he want a partnership now? What there was a history of was playing it fast and loose with the truth. In that, Boba Fett was no different from any other bounty hunter. It was that kind of a business. Fett was just better at it, was all. What had happened to the Bounty Hunters Guild was proof of that. Things might be different, Dengar knew, when Boba Fett got his strength back. Fett might not want to repay Dengar with a partnership, for all that he had done to keep him alive and safe. Dengar's reward might be a blaster charge right into his chest, leaving a scorched hole big enough to put a humanoid's fist through. Fett's obsession with secrecy was notorious in all the scummy dives and watering holes across the galaxy. His past was largely unknown, and was likely to stay that way, given how those who poked into his affairs had a way of turning up dead. That was the real reason Dengar had sent Manaru away. It was one thing for him to risk Fett's lethal treachery. He didn't want the female he loved to wind up facing a blaster muzzle. So what did you want to know? Dengar pulled himself back from his grim meditations to the hard-eyed female, regarding him from the other side of the chamber. Same thing I wanted to know before. He nodded toward the entrance to the subchamber. What's your connection with Boba Fett? Neela shook her head. I don't know. Oh, that's a good one. Dengar gave a quick, derisive laugh. You come sneaking in here, not exactly the smartest thing to do, and you don't even know why. That's what I came here to find out. That's why I wanted to talk to him. Neela glanced toward the subchamber, then back toward Dengar. That's why I left him where you would be sure to find him. Wait a minute, said Dengar. You left him? She nodded. I found him before you did, but I knew there was nothing I could do for him, not with what the Sarlacc had done. He needed medical attention, more than anything I could do. I took a chance that you'd take care of him, that you'd keep him alive. And why is that so important to you? He's a bounty hunter, and you are a dancing girl in Jabba's palace. Dengar peered more closely at her. What's he got to do with you? I told you before. Neela's voice rose to a fierce shout. I don't know. I just know that there is a connection, some kind of connection, between the two of us. I knew that back when I first saw him, in the palace, in Jabba's court. When that fat slug had poor Oola killed, when she was tugging against the chain and the trapdoor in front of the throne was opening. Both of Neela's fists were trembling and white-knuckled. All of the other girls were watching from the passageway, and there was nothing any of us could do. There never is, said Dengar. He could taste his own bitterness in his mouth. That's how things happen in this universe. She wasn't here in this chamber with him. She was lost in her own memory. And then we could hear her screaming, and I couldn't look anymore. That was when I saw him, just standing there at the side of the court and watching. Bounty hunters, said Dengar dryly, make it a habit to stay out of other creatures' business, unless they're paid to do something about it. And when the screaming was over and Jabba and the others were still laughing, he was still there, just as before, and still watching. Neela closed her eyes for a moment as a shudder ran through her slight body. And then, the strangest thing, he turned and looked at me, right into my eyes. Her voice filled with both fear and wonder. All the way across Jabba's court, and it was like there was nobody else there at all. That was how it felt, and that was when I knew that there was something between the two of us. She refocused her gaze on Dengar. Connection isn't the right word. It's something else, something from the past. I even knew his name without asking anyone else. Neela slowly shook her head. But that was all I knew. All right. The story intrigued Dengar. A matter of practical interest as well. If this female meant something to Boba Fett, then knowing just what it was might give him an additional bargaining chip. You said it was something from the past. Your past? She nodded. Well, that's a start. But nothing you can remember, I take it. Another nod. So how did you wind up at Jabba's palace? I don't know that either. Neela's fists uncurled, empty and trembling. I don't know how I got there. All I remember is Ula. And the other girls, they helped me. They showed me, her voice ebbed softer, what I was to do. Her memory had been wiped. Dengar recognized the signs, the confusion and welling fear, and the little bits and pieces, scraps of another existence, leaking through. No wipe was ever complete. Memory was stored in too many places throughout the humanoid brain. To go after every bit, eradicating them all, would probably be fatal, a reduction beyond basic life maintenance processes. There were easier and less expensive ways of killing a sentient being. So someone, thought Dengar, wanted her alive. Fett? What about your name? Dengar nodded toward her. Neela, was that something you remembered? No, Jabba called me that. I don't know why, but I knew. Her brow furrowed with concentration. I knew it wasn't my real name, my true name. Somebody took that from me, and I couldn't get it back. No matter how hard I tried. Suspicions. What she told Dengar coincided with his own. Neela was a slave name. It didn't fit her. The aristocratic bearing she possessed was too obvious, even in the ill-fitting, scavenged outfit she wore now. She wouldn't be alive now. The Dune Sea's loping predators would be cracking her bones, if there weren't some tough fighting spirit inside her. Things would have gone differently if Jabba had tried to throw her, instead of the other girl, Ula, to his pet rancor. It would have been Neela, rather than Princess Leia, wrapping the chain around Jabba's immense throat and choking the life out of him. Dengar had more suspicions, which he didn't feel like voicing right at the moment. Fett must have done it. The other bounty hunter must have brought her to Jabba's palace. He'd probably also been the one who'd performed the memory wipe on her. The big question was why. Dengar couldn't believe it had been done on Jabba's orders. The Hutt had enjoyed young and beautiful objects, but he'd also been too tight with his credits to have commissioned the kidnapping of the daughter of one of the galaxy's noble houses. The only reason Leia Organa had wound up on the end of one of Jabba's chains was that she had come into Jabba's lair of her own accord, seeking to rescue the carbonite-encased Han Solo. A captured noblewoman with a blanked-out memory wasn't exactly the same kind of a bargain. So Fett must have been working for someone else while he had ostensibly been in Jabba's employ. That wouldn't have been unusual. Dengar knew from his own experience that bounty hunters nearly always had more than one gig going on at a time, with no particular loyalty to any creature whose payroll they might be on. Or the other possibility, Boba Fett might have had his own reasons for wiping the memory of this female, whoever she really was, and bringing her to Jabba's palace, disguised as a simple dancing girl. The puzzle rotated inside Dengar's mind. Maybe Fett had been stashing her away, in some place where she wouldn't be likely to be found. That was one of the sleazier bounty hunter tricks, finding someone with a price on his or her or its head, then keeping the merchandise hidden until the price for it was raised higher. Dengar had never done it, and he hadn't heard of Boba Fett doing it either. Fett didn't have to. He already commanded astronomical prices for his services. Is there anything else you remember? Dengar rubbed the coarse stubble on his chin as he studied the female. Even the littlest thing. No. Neela shook her head. There's nothing. It's all gone, except what? Another name. Another name besides his. She tilted her head to one side, as though trying to catch the whisper of a distant voice. I think it's a name that belongs to a man. Yeah. Dengar unfolded his arms and hooked his thumbs into his belt. What's the name? Nil something. Wait a minute. She rubbed the corner of her brow. Now, I remember. It was Nil Posandum. Or something like that. Neela's expression turned hopeful. Is that somebody important? Somebody I should know about? Dengar shook his head. Never heard of anybody like that. Still, Neela looked a little crestfallen. It's something to go on. Maybe. He had his doubts about whether it was anything useful. He had even bigger doubts about Neela herself, or whatever her real name is, thought Dengar. Keeping one's contacts primed for information was an essential part of the bounty hunter trade. He had been in and out of Mos Eisley and other scum holes on a regular basis, listening and asking the right questions, and he hadn't heard anything fitting her description. If anybody was looking for her, they were doing it on the quiet. That might make getting paid for finding her somewhat difficult. Or else another possibility rose in Dengar's thoughts. Somebody doesn't want her to be found. Boba Fett might have been working for someone who had wanted this Neela to be disposed of, maybe in some way that left her still alive. What better way than to strip out her memory and stick her on a backwater planet like Tatooine? Though how long she would have stayed alive in Jabba's palace was debatable, given the Hutt's murderous amusements. Whoever had sent her there couldn't have been too concerned about her survival. Then why not just kill her quick and fast, for whatever reasons they had, rather than leave her where any number of the galaxy's hustling scoundrels, the criminal dregs that had found employment with Jabba, might have spotted her? His brain felt weighted down with all these questions stacking up on top of each other. Mysteries and skullduggery were what one dealt with in the bounty hunter trade. All this reminded Dengar of why he had wanted to get out of it. There must be an easier way to make a living, or a safer one. Now he had two potential bombs on his hands, either one of which could result in a quick death for him if he was lucky, or a messy one if his luck ran true to form. It hadn't been hard enough getting involved with Boba Fett's fortunes. Now he had to deal with the enigmatic Neela as well. She was a loose laser cannon by herself. If she'd had a blaster, Dengar supposed he would have been crisped by now. Plus, there were those unseen figures from her past who'd put her here. They might not be too happy about her turning up again. If they were the kind of people who hired Boba Fett to do their dirty work for them, they wouldn't be likely to have too many scruples about eliminating everyone hooked up with her. None of it looked good, which had its own upside. The more risk, Dengar reminded himself, the more profit. That, more than anything in the so-called hunter's creed, was what governed the actions of bounty hunters, from Boba Fett down to himself. If there was a chance of being partners with Fett and reaping the rewards from that, he would have to ramp up his courage to a new level. "All right," said Dengar aloud. He unfolded his arms and pointed to the female on the other side of the hiding place's main chamber. "Let's work out an arrangement, you and me. Stipulation number 1, don't try to kill me. If we're going to get anything accomplished around here, that's a basic requirement." Neela appeared to think it over, then nodded. "Okay. And if you try, I'm going to make sure it's your corpse that gets thrown out of here. Got me?" She nodded again, with just a trace of impatience. "Number 2, I'm in charge here. I'm running the show." Neela's anger flared. "Wait a minute. Shut up," said Dengar. "It's for your own good, and it's just for the time being. You get back to wherever you came from, you get your real name and everything that comes with it returned to you, then you can do whatever you want. But right now, you don't even know who you are. You don't know who might be gunning for you. You don't know anything about what the galaxy's like once you get off this little rock heap surface. Even if you could find some way out of here without my help, you might poke your nose into some place like Mos Eisley and get your whole head detached from your neck. There's plenty of types who'd do that for you, even without knowing who you might be." His lecture had a visible effect on her. "Very well," said Neela sullenly. "You're in charge for now." The things I put up with, thought Dengar to himself. It was all for Manaru's sake. He had to keep that in mind. On the other side of all this, there was her, and a life together with the female he loved, if I get that far. "I'm glad we understand each other." Dengar pointed to a larger, open niche at the farthest end of the chamber. "You might as well make yourself comfortable down here. I don't want you wandering around topside. There's food and supplies. Anything else you need, just let me know. I'll have those 2 medical droids give you a quick scan to make sure you're all right. Tatooine's got some nasty bugs you can pick up." Neela looked straight back at him. "What about Boba Fett? That's why I came here. That's number 3. You don't see him, you don't talk to him, you don't have anything to do with him unless I'm right there with you." "Why?" "Like I told you before, for your own good." Dengar indicated the subchamber with a tilt of his head. That guy's one dangerous Barv. If there's some kind of connection between you and him, it might not be one that's to your benefit. When he's got his strength back, he might kill you just as easily as look at you. And you won't be asking any more questions then, believe me. The message seemed to sink in. All right, said Neela. Whatever you say. There was more that he hadn't said. His precautions weren't just for her sake. I don't want the two of them conspiring against me, thought Dengar. Even before Boba Fett got his full strength back, that razor-sharp mind of his would be working and scheming away. Fett would be fully capable of making his own deals with Neela that she wouldn't be able to resist falling in with. A bounty hunter didn't get the drop on people just with weapons that someone could see and feel burning through one's gut. The history of what Boba Fett had pulled off with the old Bounty Hunters Guild indicated that he was a master at ensnaring sentient creatures in subtler traps. Though you wind up just as dead, thought Dengar, either way. And if Boba Fett had been lying and playing for time, back when Dengar had found him out there in the Dune Sea's wastes, the quickest way to dissolve any partnership would be to use Neela as his cat's paw. Now I've got two that I've got to watch out for. That was another reason Dengar had wanted the female down here, rather than wandering around on the surface. He had his hands full as it was. He didn't need anyone else hooking up with Neela, for whatever agenda they might have. She might as well have read his thoughts. A thin smile appeared as Neela regarded him. You trust me? Of course not. On that point, Dengar could afford to be honest with her. I don't trust anyone. That was almost true. There was always Manaroo, but that was something different. Nobody survives in this business by going around trusting creatures. Let's just say that I've got an idea of what to expect from you now. And if you're smart enough to play along with me, maybe you'll get what you want. Neela signaled her understanding with a quick nod. I still want to see him. That's easy enough, said Dengar. But if you were planning on having any kind of talk with Fett, I don't think that's going to happen anytime real soon. He's still unconscious. Just as well. The thin smile faded from Neela's face. I changed my mind about that part, for now. I've begun to see the wisdom of your cautious attitude. Maybe it's better if he doesn't know about me, that I found him out in the Dune Sea, and that I'm here, waiting. As you pointed out, whatever our connection is, it might not be exactly safe for me. Suit yourself. Dengar's caution went up a notch. She's a fast learner, he thought. All the more reason to be careful. Come on. He pushed himself away from the wall of the main chamber. Let's go pay our guest of honor a visit. The tall medical droid's appendages raised in warning as Dengar and Neela entered the subchamber. Please observe the necessary hygienic protocols. The chart of vital signs scrolled down the display on SH Sigma 1B's cylindrical torso. The patient's condition remains very critical. Yeah, right. Dengar pushed the droid aside, away from the pallet in the center of the space. This Barv's survived worse things than your attentions. If you haven't managed to kill him, then nothing will. Neela stepped close to the side of the pallet and looked down at the unconscious form. That's him? She sounded almost disappointed. That's Boba Fett? From the pile of gear in the sub-chamber's corner, Dengar picked up a battered helmet, etched with the digestive fluids of the Sarlacc's gullet. He turned the helmet's narrow-visored gaze toward Neela. This is Boba Fett. She shrank back from the empty helmet, a sudden fear showing in her widened eyes. One hand tentatively reached out to touch the pitted metal, then jerked back as though scorched. She slowly nodded. That's what I saw. Her voice was a barely audible whisper. And I knew it was him. That's how everybody knows him. Dengar turned the helmet's blank visage toward himself. He could guess how the female felt. A little apprehensive chill ran down his own spine. All through the galaxy. He nodded toward the figure on the pallet. Not very many creatures have seen him like that, or if they have, they didn't live to tell about it. For a moment, the only sound in the subchamber was the clicking and sighing of the cardiopulmonary assists that the medical droids had set in place. Then Neela turned a somber gaze toward Dengar. I did, she said quietly. Dengar was unable to make a reply. The dark spaces in her eyes, and what might lie beyond them, unnerved him as much as the empty helmet. He turned away to set it back down on the rest of Boba Fett's gear. Remember, said Neela, don't tell him. Don't tell him anything about me. By the time Dengar turned back around, the female had slipped out of the subchamber. He was alone with the other bounty hunter. The presence of the medical droids barely registered on Dengar's senses. He stood looking down at Boba Fett for a while longer. The little trace of fear hadn't gone away. It was still there, inching along his spine. Even unconscious, this man was enough to spook ordinary creatures. There's too much past, thought Dengar. Inside Boba Fett's skull, a whole galaxy full of it. Who could tell what was going on in there as he slept and dreamed his dark dreams?